Okay, so we're going to talk about release management, think big. And I had one particular topic that I wanted to throw out here, and it's related to a survey that we'll be sending out about environments. Were there any other topics that you guys wanted to cover off on in this meeting? Especially anything that you're currently working on from a design perspective and kind of planning breakdown.
I think the conversation Nathan just sparked on the Runbooks one might be a good second candidate.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start there until I find the environment survey link, and I'll drop that in the agenda. So what are you thinking about Runbooks?
I just saw
yes.
Nathan.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say I just saw Nathan's suggestion, so maybe if he could verbalize that. So
Yeah, sure.
There's your intro.
So I just posted this like 20 minutes ago. So I've just been thinking through our Runbooks feature that we're hoping to implement. And I'm just wondering if we've considered some other alternatives other than Jupyter Runbooks to meet the business need of being able to kind of execute releases and like manage them. In particular, what I was thinking is we could do it all kind of in-house if we augmented our like our Markdown to be able to run code from checkboxes or something similar to that. And there'd be a number of, sorry, go for it. Yeah, so I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, so yes, we have thought about that. The first MVC was just about creating a connection between the way people are running Runbooks today. And from the customers that I've spoken to, Jupyter was kind of like their de facto standard for GitLab. But really, this link could be a blanket URL that has a format called Runbook. So it's like another asset that they're just adding to a release. And then as we get more information about what people are linking there, we would be able to then distill like, okay, well, can we create templates in the YAML file? Can we look at other ways to support releases more fundamentally? But this first MVC was twofold. One, supporting what people are using today. And then two, is there a quick way to generate better visibility between releases and Runbooks? But I completely agree with you that Jupyter Notebooks will not be the only way that we support Runbooks in the future.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's more motivated by we see people already using Jupyter Notebooks. How can we integrate that?
Right. And in truth, I think just providing a link and the ability to link multiple Runbooks to any given release is more valuable than even supporting Jupyter Notebooks at first. So maybe like the very first iteration is there's a design for multiple links to assets that are Runbooks. Second design is more integration with Jupyter Notebooks. Third is, supporting execution of running code from checkboxes in the YAML file or whatever file makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay, that's cool. That makes sense. I was thinking that it feels like we're kind of almost abusing Jupyter Notebooks for a purpose that they weren't really intended. Like we're trying to get statuses out of them, and that's not really what they're intended for. But that kind of makes sense if we're just supporting existing workflows rather than, it's not so much that we're presenting Jupyter Notebooks as like, this is the new way that we're going to recommend everyone do releases.
Right. It's the one part that I'm having a hard time with is collecting data on the types of notebooks people are using for Jupyter. Customers haven't provided any of their notebooks. So I can't really see like, how are they breaking up their notebooks today? What kind of actions are they taking from a notebook? I have lots of experience coordinating with Excel or scripts ran in Rundeck, but I have very little experience with Jupyter Notebook. So I'm unable to like really furnish a point of view, even though I'm getting told by people who are using Jupyter Notebooks at GitLab that they want to be able to connect them to their releases. And then they want to see like in the same breath, how far along their release is based on those tasks inside that notebook. So they see like discrete tasks in their notebook and they want that to be an indicator that they're able to deploy. And that's kind of the part that I wanted to support out of the gate and kind of get more users giving feedback to leveraging runbooks. But I completely agree with you that there's probably more in-house way to support people who are using things like Excel or Word documents to manage their workflows. And Mike, what were your kind of thoughts or concepts, or Hayana too, on this?
Yeah, it was more, I think that sounds like a great, like what Nathan was originally suggesting, you know, kind of keeping it in there and not having to, you're right, trending towards GitLab is the solution to do things, opposed to like, you know, having another connection to this outside thing. But I think that rises and falls on our ability to that execute code. How hard is that going to be? Is that a giant leap, or is that doable? Was really what my questions were around. So I don't know if that's an answer we have today, but definitely like, you know, the approach of and your explanation of why we're going down the path we do. But if we do want to, you know, go down that further, I think that would be the research spike, whatever word we're using for that is how big is that? Because if it's not that big, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that there's two risks that we can take. We can say that we prescribe using GitLab to manage your releases with our GitLab runbooks that are filed as a part of your release, and you need to recreate your current notebooks, whatever tool you're using, in order to use our prescribed way, which is a change management exercise that can be scary for people that are having to uproot the teams that are external to their pipeline. So if we think about what release management does, is that it coordinates a bunch of activities that are outside of the direct purview of the engineering team. So like these could be marketing events, these could be update a separate web page, these could be release your press conference note. And then there's even a run book that could be added to this release that are all about the prep before, like make sure that you create an issue or you send an email to all the product managers. So like when we look at everybody's workflows, we can see that the adoption of a GitLab provided solution would require them to map their current stuff into it versus just allowing them to add whatever they wanted to the GitLab releases to just show progress. So that's the other kind of argument is incrementally, how can we beef up our data asset on how people want to see runbooks in GitLab while still adding value for execution and not scaring them, because the scaring part will cause like a big drop in our adoption.
Yep, super valid. And then one other, you know, slight drawback, if we're going to go kind of more the issue kind of route, like, is one thing that's nice about Jupyter Runbooks and just this idea in general is that if you manage it as code that goes with your release and you need to go back in time, those two things are always in sync. So if we were going to go the whatever other route, I would think we need to make sure it's something that can be managed as code so it's always in sync with the release, because that runbook is only valid for that release potentially. I mean, it might not change, right? Your process might not change, but it might if you know, releases 1 through 3, you did this thing, but in 4, you made this giant change. No, that run book for 1 through 3 is only valid for 1 through 3. So if you're looking at release 4, it needs to be synced with that.
I like where your head's at, because if we were to look at an agile workflow and people taking retrospective actions and applying it to their release deployment process, we could see that there's incremental changes in their release process, or say that somebody goes through an audit and they identify certain actions that they have to show that they're compliant for. This is where a run book would be really useful to show an update post-audit that they're now compliant. Those are the kinds of actions that we could support as a part of run book changes and comparisons. Good point. So I think from my action item here that I already have kind of like as a to-do are to create more issues around the different types of runbooks that we want to support. I have a call with a customer today, Dan Quist, who wants to use Rundeck to support runbook scripts. So he might be a good candidate to understand what other use cases for runbooks are there that we're not considering as a part of the release architecture. So that'll be good. Okay. Anything else on the future of runbooks and what we're thinking there? As a note, I did have my opportunity canvas and presentation to Scott, and he greenlit it and approved it as a viable investment opportunity. So now we're good to just dive headfirst into making it a priority for release orchestration, which is great. I'll post the video in our release Slack channel. Thanks, John. Once that gets posted.
Jackie, is this something that we can add to Unfiltered if it's not there yet?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, once he posts it, I'll add it to all those normal channels.
Cool, thank you.
For sure. Hannah, do you want to give your status update since we're done with the runbooks conversation? Oh, go ahead.
Can I throw one more kind of moonshotty, just a thought? I don't think we should dive deep into it at this point, but it just so happened that like we talked about runbooks, and then like the conversation before in the conversation was about like how can we make, you know, using like the GitLab YAML or setting up feature flags, or sorry, not feature flags, review apps easier, right? So those two things happen back to back, and an idea popped in my head of like, wait a minute, if we had run books that walked you through how to set up feature flags, like, so just the idea of maybe somewhere down the road that we could build run books ourselves to help onboarding and user adoption in our own product.
Yes, nailed it. And I would also say there's opportunities to leverage the new Verify group for templates so that we don't have to build them. We can create the spec for them and the examples, and then that team would build them.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, if we, that was my thought too, kind of, is that if we built in this generic functionality to basically run code inside of Markdown, we could use it for releases, but we really could use it for anything. Like we could maybe integrate it with our GitLab APIs. You could create buttons that could automatically close issues, or I don't know, basically anything you can imagine that our API could do, you could somehow build it into an issue and use it for all sorts of automation.
Do you mind writing this issue up,
Nathan? Yeah,
okay.
I can definitely do that.
All right. I think that would really help, because then I can bring it to also the other product managers to see if we can get resources from other teams to help us build this. Because I think this could be a really big benefit to our relationship with milestones and releases. So for example, hey, here's executing the mass assignment or mass removal of certain things from a milestone if it's already conducted in a release. Like that would be, you know, something that we could help bridge the gap that I know that Plan is looking at doing.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be great. Okay. Great ideas, guys. Love this. All right. Hannah, do you want to give your status update? And then I can open up the jobs to be done environment survey and we can talk through that.
Cool. Yeah, just a quick update on the status of the release user interview. So this is related to the UX scorecard of the jobs to be done with it last year. So the main goal is to understand mostly if people can use the new design solutions. So a lot of what Nathan has implemented for releases over the last, I don't know, 2-3 months, maybe more. And based on the results, we want to evaluate the scorecard grade that we assign. So there's a grade from ranges from A to F. And during my heuristic analysis, I assigned an F because, well, we cannot create a release through the UI. So that was the main job to be done. And there's a lot of other points there. We have 3 participants. There's still 1 user interview scheduled for this week, I think Friday. So if any of you folks want to watch, Arden, Jackie, and Laura, they're already there. Feel free to join our call. And I believe that many of our assumptions were already confirmed, already correct. And they match a lot of the UX scorecard recommendations that I made last year for the releases page. So I think we're moving in the right direction. The next step is really go and dive into the opportunity canvas and see together with Jackie how do we want to tackle this. But it's really interesting to see people using the new functionalities. And it's nice to get a rescore there. So that's it. Just a quick status update on that. And then if anyone has a comment, feel free. If not, over to Jackie.
By the way, I really like those user interview experiences. I think it is a really cool opportunity for us to learn how people are perceiving what we've built or what we thought we were building. And I love attending those. I would say I learn just so much from how other people perceive these things. So that's really cool. Another quick update before I dive into the environments jobs to be done. I do have the blackout periods presentation to Scott next week. The biggest, and it's going to be called deploy freezes, because that's what our survey said, that 75% of people call them deploy freezes. The reason why I don't want to start diving into a bunch of technical implementation details or solution validation like we did with Runbooks prior to presenting this problem is that it goes against potentially what we would want to support at GitLab. It kind of bifurcates, like for people who have a bunch of automation and are all about their CI/CD pipeline getting more automated and more nimble and requiring at-will deployments, blackout periods doesn't make sense. But for these enterprises that have this legacy workflow, blackout periods are a part of their normal life. So it really is 2 user groups, and there really isn't anybody in between. They either do it or they don't do it. It's binary. So we have to assess I've already assessed it, but we have to determine if implementing something like the ability to configure deploy freezes or windows of time where you can't deploy to production environments goes against our ethos at GitLab, or if the ability to support these kinds of actions is important and integral for transitioning customers to deploying all the time whenever they want in a high available way. So after I present to Scott, we'll have a good idea of if it's worth investing in, and if it is, then we'll figure out what it makes sense. And I think, Nathan, you're kind of on the front end for it, kind of to evaluate and think, well, what would that look like? What would we need from back end to make that happen? But it would be interesting to make that story in the market, because right now that's kind of killing us when we go head to head with Zebia Labs or other tools that are built from the bottom up in release orchestration. So I'll keep you guys posted on that, and of course share it with you.
The one thought I had when I was looking over that issue is that there's some way we could solve it. I don't want to hijack this meeting too much, but I can see us solving it really simply by just adding like a new keyword in a GitLab YAML file, like only deploy Monday through Friday or something, like in your actual GitLab YAML file.
Yeah.
But I also saw somewhere that in one of the requirements that it said that the people that are defining these kind of blackout windows aren't necessarily the developers and aren't necessarily comfortable with editing YAML. So in my head, that's kind of the split, is either we do it in the YAML file or we'd have to build kind of a separate UI where this would be managed. And that one would be significantly more work, I think.
Do you think that we could support both?
Perhaps. Yeah, maybe the front end GUI could actually just behind the scenes edit the GitLab YAML file or something like that. That could be an interesting option. Yeah. So there might be some possibilities for a hybrid approach.
Because what a sexy MVC. Just add this thing in your YAML file and you're good to go. It could be a documentation and change that we make. That would be great. Going,
like we already have, in fact, we could almost do it already today without too much modification, because we already say certain pipelines only run versus on certain variables. So we could add a new variable like day of week or something. You could say only run if the day of week is Monday through Friday. And that would be, I would think that would be very minimal in terms of the actual work.
Yeah.
Can we kind of accomplish a similar thing right now with like scheduling pipelines? Or am I mixing those two up? Because you can, for example, I have a pipeline scheduled that runs at like 4 a.m. every day, and then it runs through my GitLab YAML file, and there's a schedules keyword that just triggers like just do this part of my GitLab YAML file during this block of time. Is that kind of similar to what we're thinking, or did I totally miss that?
So deploy windows would be, we don't want to allow a push to production.
Mm-hmm.
And I think pipeline schedules are more about running on certain conditions being satisfied. But I just saw the link, so I'm going to open it up right now and post it in our agenda. So
yeah,
here's an example. Here's a use case, and tell me if maybe it does work. But for example, a user has a team that they don't want to deploy to production on Friday, but they still want all of the test suites and the CI to run. So they would say nobody can deploy onto production environment, but everything else up into production would work. Potentially. That could be a use case. And this is where I don't think the scheduling pipelines would work, because it's like all or nothing. You can't run your pipeline, or you will run your pipeline.
Yeah, schedule. Well, so scheduling, like for example, on mine, and I'm just talking this out. So I have like 3 different blocks. I have like a scheduling block, and then my production doesn't run when that happens, because I think there's like an accept keyword, accept schedules, I think is how you can kick that out. But I think too, Jackie, I think maybe pipelines, the scheduling pipeline doesn't actually solve this problem, because that's looking at it from hey, I want this to happen at a certain time every day or whatever. And I think what you're saying is you want folks to be able to just run things as normal, but you want to kind of block, deployments to production on Friday, right? So
yeah, or holidays, or there's an ad hoc window. So like nobody
like blackout dates.
Yeah, nobody can accidentally deploy to production, because that's the risk here, is that you have a fully automated pipeline. Developers could be merging back to master whenever. We could say that you always want to deploy from master. So your process could stay the same, but you just want to prevent that deployment.
Yeah, I'm with you. So kind of like scheduling, but also just an extra step past that too. So.
But what's cool is we can paint the picture of how do you use pipeline scheduling in conjunction with a deployment freeze to facilitate automated deployments. So like there's that narrative we can create in the documentation. But I feel like there are 2 sides of the same coin, but one is about not deploying to production and having people still use the process. It just doesn't allow you to make changes to that last environment.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no, good thoughts there. Okay. I'll add a comment back, Nathan, on the blackout period MVC that kind of documents what we just talked about. And you can let me know if I repeated that back correctly. And then we can get somebody on the back end to take a look at it and see like what changes would we potentially want to make from this side. And that could be our first MVC, if Scott feels like we want to support this as a product vision. Okay, we got 30 minutes left. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into this environments jobs to be done document. By the way, John, you had me install this tabular thing. This is the first time in my life I've ever had tabs less than 30 open. So it's a win today.
That's awesome. Chase created that. I don't want to take any credit at all, but that, yes, that's all. That's so cool.
Okay, so I created this issue in the UX research. The whole ethos of this is about understanding how people are using environments so that we could even establish a job to be done. Because we have a couple of different assumptions and hypotheses that people aren't using environments because there's certain perceptions of security or other issues related to deploying with GitLab. So I want to really dig into why people aren't using environments, or if they're using environments, how they're using them. So I've gone in ahead and added some hypotheses here. We can discuss them right now and kind of get your guys' feedback on what you know about environments and if this is something that you think is important to drill into. So the first part of it is, I suspect that people aren't using environments as intended or as much as we would expect them to be using them. So our expectation is if you can deploy anywhere, however you want with GitLab, you should be able to do that with an environment. But today, people are oftentimes deploying outside of GitLab or not even using the CD functionality. The second one is that environments are not necessary. So there's something in our documentation or something in how it's set up that people are not feeling compelled to use environments. And then users just don't really get the value of it. So this could be a conversation in a blog post. This can be people just don't know all the feature functionality that we have available in environments. But either way, they're not using them in the amount that we thought they would be. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Is there potentially the fourth one that they are actually using environments, they're just not defining them, right? So the environment can live outside of GitLab if you're deploying to like AWS or something like that. And if you're not setting up your YAML them correctly, then we might just not be aware of the environments when they actually are environments.
Yep, I like that.
Yeah, all those hypothesis points kind of resonate. Like intuitively, I feel like those are all correct. I know for me, before I joined GitLab, I was working on a project that used Azure DevOps, and that piece of software has a much more distinct split between CI and CD. It's like two separate tabs. Like one is build, one is release, and they're completely like separate concepts, which obviously has its disadvantages, but it also makes it more obvious that you're like doing release focused things rather than we kind of mix the two. And I feel like people still think of it more as CI than they do as CD. So that might be another hypothesis point, is that like people don't really think of our product as a CD product. They think of it as more as CI.
Okay, I like that.
Also, I'm not sure if the first point all covers this, but from my own experience as well, trying to work with environments, the hypothesis is that the interface of the product helps people finding the information or figuring out how to work with environments. Kind of related also to what Nathan says, just two separate things. In our case, it's not, but where do I find so that I can use it in my workflow?
Yeah, that's a good point, because my guess is that in Azure DevOps, the two are really quite similar under the hood, but they just have decided from a UX perspective to split the two.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when I take a step back, the biggest goal is to get more people using environments and allow us to build features incrementally. So today we have a very hard time identifying even what jobs people are trying to do with environments. We tried to like spitball that in our last UX PM meeting, and I was hitting a wall. It's like, what do people really want to do with environments? So I think that the biggest goal here is to really gain traction with environments, and that gives us a line of sight to then increase our CD suite and our CD users. Do you see any other goals that we might want to add to this survey? Okay. On the objectives, these are a little bit more tangible, very specific to what we're hoping to get out of answering specific questions and identifying the hypotheses with environments. The ones that I threw on here were about the perception of environments, understanding what are the bare minimum features that need to be in an environment page, and then what are the roadblocks. Are there other objectives that we'd want to get from the survey? I could think of identify if we need to split out the CI/CD capability of environments. We could, whoa, it's yelling at me. Hannah, do you think of any other objectives that we want to accomplish? Okay.
I think we just, like the management of it, right? I'm not sure how to verbalize it properly, but like what we really need to know, I think, is what do we need to give them to be able to manage them, right? So using them is one side of it, but like the tool we provide is the management of those. So
Like that?
yes.
Okay, I think that's good enough from an objective standpoint. We talked a little bit about this in our CI/CD PM group call today, where we were looking at progressive delivery and release capabilities as an offering for GitLab. And one of the pieces that came out of it are we not competing with customers who are using Spinnaker or interested in using Spinnaker or have used Spinnaker, because we don't support things like blue-green deployments or rollbacks natively? Are there other issues that are causing environments? Like in Zebia Labs, you can really control permissions very granularly at the environment level, so you don't ever have to give people access to the source code. You can make changes at a different way. And then security of environments being a perception. I have a couple of other questions around, what are external factors that we need to keep in mind with environments? Like if you're using specific cloud providers, are there different ways that we have to configure environments, and is that a limitation? I also have the question on what would we want to do to make this a little bit more desirable of a feature set? And then the baseline of how difficult is it to use it today? What else would we want to kind of answer?
Do we want to know like who would use this feature, or is this clear at this point?
I think we can definitely throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
It could surprise us.
Also, kind of like what type of information do people need to get started with the environment? We have the documentation, but in the workflow, what's necessary, like the steps that kind of guide them to the environment specifically.
So it's interesting too, like review apps can be considered a different environment, a dynamic environment. And when we look at how we're evaluating environments, we could potentially make this very focused on how people want to support production environments rather than something like test or other environments. Interested in kind of looking at, do we want to subset this or have a deep focus on a particular type of environment use case rather than environments in general?
I'd kind of like to know how much time people spend setting up environments right now. Like how, difficult is the current process? Is the question here? I don't think so.
How difficult is it to use? But I think the second one is, how difficult is it to manage or set up, or both of those? I've heard that it's challenging to manage environments because we can only do certain things in the front end. Like you can create, but you can't delete. And that's something that people have cited as being an annoyance. I mean, we added the delete an environment in the UI as a functionality for 12.7 and it slipped into 12.8. But that's I know that that's a pain point today, the management side of it.
Yeah, and then there's always that we're not really stopping, we're not really deleting, we're deleting the pointer of them, right? So are people aware of, is that a potential reason why people aren't using these, is because they know it's really more of a representation of them and not the actual environments?
Okay. Well, this was a good Think Big session. I think we're actually at time right now, but I think from an action item, next steps, Nathan, if you can create that one issue about allowing code to be executed from the Markdown, I think we'd be able to start some conversations on that. I'll ping you on the other issue to get some identification on how else can we support other blackout periods with either specifying an YAML and overlaying a UI on that. And then if Mike and Hannah, if you could look at the kinds of questions that I've already added to this survey and add some more, I'll schedule a follow-up call for next week for us to kind of dive into it, and then I can create the survey in Qualtrics. All right. Anything else? Good deal.
Just